On the Animal Welfare Committee to order. Mr. O'Farrell and myself, Paul Koretz, present. And so we have a quorum. I'm going to ask that we put item 3 and item 6 on consent without objection.
No objection.
So those two will be passed on consent. And item 7 continued because it was not properly agendized. So item 7 will be continued, and we will begin with item 1.
Item 1, Department of Animal Services report response to adopted budget recommendation relative to proposed requirement for veterinarians to notify the Department of Animal Services whenever a veterinarian has treated an unlicensed dog.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to summarize our report?
Please.
Okay, thank you. Well, as part of the 2014-15 budget process, our department was asked to come back and report back on 6 items. You'll hear 2 of them today. We were asked in Budget and Finance Committee about how to get vets to provide us with information on unlicensed animals. Fortunately, under state and local law, that's already happening. Whenever a vet gives a rabies vaccination to a dog, they're supposed to provide us with that rabies certificate. They mail that to us. We look it over. We see whether that dog owner and the dog are in our database, and if they are, terrific. We just update the expiration date on the rabies. If not, we put them in our database, and then we will send them a notice to secure a dog license at the next possible moment. So we believe as a result of those existing laws that are on the book, it complies with some of the question that was part of this report back. In our report as well, since we're on the subject of vets, we decided just to update the PAW committee on some of the things that we're going to be doing, including encouraging all of the vets in the city to take part of our voucher program and become sign a letter of agreement with our department. We're going to encourage them to sell licenses because they can do that. They would get $2 for every license that they sell. And then we also want to have them provide applications for vouchers, much like we gave your offices not that long ago, applications. They fill those out, send it to our department, and instead of going to a shelter, we will mail them a voucher. So as a result of all these things, we hope to increase the number of sterilizations, decrease intake, and get us to no-kill. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
And the vouchers could be used in what circumstances?
They could be used for if you're low income, you get a $70 voucher, and you would take it to one of our vets, and they would provide the sterilization surgery with no additional cost. Everybody else is eligible for a $30 discount coupon. You can take that to one of our participating vets and get a sterilization, $30 off your sterilization surgery from the veterinarian.
And if we wanted to have vets let us know about other things other than vaccinating, when they vaccinate for rabies, are other circumstances called out in the state law?
No, that's the primary one, but the good thing about that is all vets, that's one of the fundamental activities that a vet does is to provide a rabies vaccination. I think you'd get some pushback from the vets because as part of the medical community, they're loath to provide personal information on their clients to any organization, especially a governmental organization. But because rabies is a real issue and it poses a public health threat, it is on the books that they're supposed to let us know and send that information to a governmental information agency like ours to let us know that they vaccinated the animal for rabies. But for any other issue, Councilman, I think it might be problematic to have the vets provide us with that information.
And anything we do to enforce, once we've sent the letters saying that they're required to have dog licenses, what do we do as a follow-up?
We send a couple of reminder letters, and then we also have the enforcement part. We have animal control officers, but we're a little strapped in that department. We only have 63 presently, so being able to enforce every one of those infractions is very difficult for us.
Questions, comments, colleagues?
Thank you. Do you have a database excuse me, of licensed dogs that are out of compliance that you can then schedule personal follow-ups?
We could,
with?
yes.
You have that exists already?
Yes.
I mean, I would imagine. I just didn't want to assume.
We do.
And about how big is that database?
Wow. We have pardon me, 50,000 per year.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's those in compliance and out of compliance,
Yes.
right? But as ballpark, how about those out of compliance? How do you track that?
Well, we're doing something this month where the ones that are out of compliance, we're sending them a postcard and reminding them that they have to license their dog. We'll see what the response rate is to that. We'll get people that will license their dog. We'll take another look at that probably in 30 or 60 days and send a follow-up letter, and then we have to rely on the animal control officers to follow up with that. But again, I would caution you that we don't have very many, and following up on all the animals that are not in compliance is tough for us.
It's tough. But it'd be nice, if you don't have those numbers now, just to have a sense of
Sure.
of how many animals out there. And just because they're listed as being out of compliance doesn't mean they are. It just means maybe they haven't sent in their certificate.
That's absolutely correct.
So
yes.
it might just be helpful to have that information to know what we're looking at. And it's we haven't really had any sort of rabies incidents in longer than I can remember. So it's not as though there's a huge problem net right now, but just information I think would be helpful.
Okay.
Mr. Fuentes, any questions? Okay. One member of the public asking to speak, and that would be Phyllis Doherty.
Good afternoon, Phyllis Doherty. This is an interesting proposal because I don't know how we were planning to enforce it. Are we going to demand the records of veterinarians on their private customers? Are we going to tell them they can't treat animals if they don't have a license, just like maybe a mechanic couldn't fix your car if he has expired plates? It's really an impossible situation. I'm delighted with Mr. Chavez's answer because it's a foolish proposal. Rabies, by the way, is extremely important. It's very, very prevalent throughout the world. We happen to be fortunate that because of our activity in anti-rabies efforts that we don't have it, but we have had cases of it here very recently, and it spreads very fast. So the rabies is the most important thing. We've also had we had a case where we almost lost a little girl up in Northern California just a couple of years ago. The thing that you might want to look into and actually get some statistics on where you are entitled to them is how actively is the department pursuing licensing the dogs that are spayed and neutered in the city subsidized clinics. Because my understanding is that there's really no pressure on that. They rarely get the records, and you might want to make sure that we're paying for all these dogs to come into these clinics. We're entitled on those to know. We do know who they are, and you will need to see how actively they are pursuing that and following up on it.
Thank you. And this item we will note and file the report of without objection. Item number 2.
Item 2, Department of Animal Services report in response to adopted budget recommendation relative to the proposed establishment of an animal foundation.
Welcome.
Hello, thank you. Brenda Barnett, General Manager, Animal Services. We have been...
Thank you for your extensive testimony.
I was trying to be brief. We've been working with our former commissioner, Maggie Muleson, some of her staff with an interest in forming a foundation, much like the fire department or the police department or El Pueblo has to support their departments. At this point, we have a pro bono attorney working with the group to set up the nonprofit. They have compiled a very impressive stack of slides to show possible projects that go everything from collecting dog toys for the shelters and cat toys to possibly operating our out of service shelter as a job training for community members who could use training in everything from janitorial to animal care, and it would also provide additional care and space for animals that need sheltering in the community. They have started identifying potential board members and the like, and I think they were hoping to launch in the fall in September, but it actually may be a couple of months past that, but there should be a launch sometime this winter that would sort of announce the beginning of this foundation.
So what's the exact purpose of the foundation?
To raise
What are
money.
its goals?
To raise money to support activities of the department that are not funded with the general fund.
And how did we do that before this foundation? I'm sure we must have gotten contributions to the department in some way.
Well, we do. We have two funds that are charitably funded for the most part. One being the Animal Welfare Trust Fund, and we get some money from that just from estates and bequests from community members who may have adopted from the city shelters or just may have a soft spot in their heart for us. We also do some online fundraising through our website. People can make contributions online. We have from time to time sent out direct mail pieces. That's so labor intensive, we don't do a lot of that. But we actively pursue grants. And for example, I think you just recently saw the $380,000 grant from the ASPCA to underwrite some of the fees for some of our New Hope partners. So we do as much fundraising as we can on staff. This wouldn't be in competition with that. That would be separate from that.
So this would be an outside entity as opposed to...
It would be outside.
To seek grants. And
Pretty much, yes. When we talked to the controller about this several months ago, probably a year ago now, the recommendation was to separate it from the city to make accounting a lot simpler and to make it more of a charity.
So what are the next steps to get it going?
Well, I've was in contact with them within the last week and a half, and we're setting some meetings up, I believe, for probably early September, and then looking at some kind of a launch this year. And we hope that all of the council members on this committee will be there and plan to, say something about animals and animal welfare. I know the mayor's looking forward to being there, and we're challenging him to adopt a dog that day.
I beat him to it.
You did. You're on my
Great
Facebook.
dog.
Thank you very
Great.
much.
Any other questions?
Quick, after Mr. Fuentes.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, the police and fire foundations have been tremendously successful in aiding the departments with the different sort of things that they need short of personnel. Mm-hmm. And I understand that they actually even do help sometimes with training and expertise and that sort of thing. The Park Foundation, I think, has been almost as successful as police and fire, and I think it's a fantastic idea. The one thing I wanted to add here is that you mentioned here this is an opportunity for workforce development. Is that right?
Yes, we're looking at something sort of like the Good Boys or Good Girls, the group that's downstairs here in City Hall, where people who need some kind of job training. We haven't identified a group, whether they're people who are homeless or veterans, or we haven't identified a specific group, but people who might need additional job training may be able to learn as many as 7 different jobs through a shelter operation.
I don't know where I think I saw the group Chrysalis, which is a tremendous organization that deals
Right.
with folks who are sort of ready to rejoin the workforce in mainstream society. I would also recommend, it's not an amendment or anything to the report, but the Workforce Development and the WIA boards, the Workforce Investment Act, Workforce Investment Boards, they have monies that are available to this type of training. I think if we had the ability to lend the legitimacy of the city of Los Angeles in this foundation, maybe there's some WIA dollars that could help underwrite some of that training for the foundation as it gets up and going. But I think it's a phenomenal idea, and thank you for your leadership
That's
on the
great.
issue.
Yeah, we did meet with Chrysalis. They're a great organization. We've also talked to several of the unions and have support. As long as it's job training, the unions are very much supportive of doing something like this too.
Mr. Farrell?
Thank you. Along the lines of Mr. Fuentes just talked about, in terms of the mission, is it to help with workforce and job training, and is it to focus on where the greatest need is? For example, South LA Animal Shelter, might there be a focus there? I'm just curious if you have a refined mission yet.
Well, there's not really a refined mission. I think but the primary thing is to help animal services do our work better. In terms of the shelter that they're looking at as a possible workforce training, it is the old South LA shelter, because that's where the most members of the community who could benefit from that job training are located. It wouldn't make sense to try to bus them across the city for job training.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a great idea as well, and anything that can help, beef up the services that you offer. There's always such a need there. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I forgot to mention one thing, and I know that the foundation is still in its nascent stages, so we're far from sort of getting there, but I know that there's a real sort of desire to do more volunteer work as well.
Yes.
And I have heard from members of my constituency that would like to see both a reserve ranger for the parks and animal control officer type positions, and I know that it's a matter of resources in order to get people trained to be able to represent the city of Los Angeles. So maybe down the road the foundation could serve as an opportunity to do that RACO sort of reserve animal control officer sort of program, because I know it's something that members of my community really are asking to see happen.
Particularly if they could offer some kind of a stipend. I mean, we've been trying for 2 years to fill another class and have been unable to do so. But I think if the foundation could offer those volunteers some kind of a stipend, because it's a pretty big commitment of time.
And the money for the training, because as important as it is, I imagine that you have other priorities that sort of are ahead in the line. And so if there's a way to get the foundation to sort of help there, then I think it's a way to exercise people's volunteerism and the mission to try to serve. Thank you.
Well, if there's no other questions or comments, we'll note and file this report also without objection. But first, I just noticed we have a card from a member of the public, Phyllis Doherty.
Phyllis Doherty. I just want to remind you that this has been done a couple of times already. As a matter of fact, Patricia Hurst actually started this, and they already so it's already incorporated and it's already in existence. I think all I'd have to do is probably just revive that. You don't need to start all over again. But we've run into a lot of problems. Ed Boakes ran into a lot of problems in trying to do it. I'm on the Los Angeles County Animal Care Foundation, and even though you're getting pro bono work done, maybe on forming this, because it's an outside organization, be sure that you're paying everybody that does work on it, because even the suspicion of not being objective on it, and you'll have no oversight of it. We have some oversight in the county because Marcia's on our board. But when Ed Boakes tried to set that up with the city, he was not allowed to do it. So there apparently is something in the city charter that precludes it. I just hope that you're going to keep a really close watch on the funds, because we already have these 2 funds for collecting money for the animals. We need to be sure that this is used for the purposes that the people that are donating believe it's going to be used for. They need to be made totally aware that it may be spent on a lot of outside interests.
Thank you. Ms. Barnett, I think I have some follow-up questions based on that last testimony. The previous foundation, is there any connection to the one that we're starting up now, and does it make sense for us to piggyback on that, or has it been disbanded long enough that it doesn't make sense?
Well, there's one foundation that I'm aware of which operates the Love and Leisha's adoption boutique over at the West Side Pavilion. That foundation initially was started with the idea that it would become a fundraising arm, much like what we're trying to do now for the organization. When they decided that they wanted to do the adoption boutique, they basically changed their mission, and they're not really a fundraising foundation for us at all. They raise their own funds, and they keep that adoption boutique open. That's the only one that I have any awareness of. One of the things that Phyllis said that is accurate, the foundation wanted me to serve on the board, and we were advised by the city attorney that that was not appropriate and I would not be allowed to serve on the board. We went early on and had a discussion with Mr. Galperin about how to do this and how to set it up properly and how to make sure everything was, all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed.
So how do we make this transparent enough without it being a city agency, but one that works with us?
It's just like the fire department or the police department or Pueblo or the parks. They're independent charities. They are required to file taxes. They're required to file their 990s. All that information is available online to pull down and investigate any charity that you want to.
Very good. Thank you. And now I will note and file that report without objection and instruct Animal Services to give us a status update in 90 days. Thank you. Item number 4.
Item number 4, Personnel Department report in response to adopted budget recommendation relative to increasing the number of exempt positions as allowed by Charter Section 1001B4 with a total of 250 exemptions.
Good afternoon. I'm Raul Lemus, Personnel Department. To summarize the report for you, as directed in the budget instructions, Personnel has provided information regarding the mechanism to increase the number of civil service exempt positions noted in Charter Section 1001B. This section provides for up to 150 civil service exempt positions. However, the Charter also provides that the Council may by ordinance increase this number up to 1% of the regular authorized positions in the city workforce. Given the provisions of this section, the 1% would reflect the possible increase of an additional 187 positions beyond the initial 150. The maximum number of possible exemptions would fluctuate with the number of authorized city positions. The approval for any additional exempt positions would continue as it does now. Departments submit the request to the mayor, who in turn forwards those recommended for exemption for the council's approval. The council has indicated that the total number of these exemptions should be capped at 250. Any specific direction for a defined cap could be included in the ordinance language if it's decided to move forward. It's recommended that the council consider this information when determining the possibility of creating an ordinance to increase the number of exemptions under this provision.
Now, I understand when this issue was looked at a number of years ago, our labor partner unions were not particularly happy about it. Have we outreached to them?
We have not at this point, no.
And is this a meet and confer item? Is it not? Is it a gray area?
I believe in discussions that we had previously with the city attorney and with CAO that it would possibly be impact bargaining.
So in that scenario, how would this be dealt with?
I would refer to the CAO labor relation expert.
Yes. It would be if the unions felt that there was an impact, they could certainly request to engage us in impact bargaining. Impact is obviously in the eye of the beholder, so they would be in the best position to determine what they felt were possible impacts to their members, if any. This is an increase of how many exempt positions over the current level?
It could be possibly up to 187 past the 150.
And we have, 32,000 employees, not counting water and power. So I'm not sure how great an impact this would be.
What's the upside and downside of doing this?
Well, I believe they would provide some flexibility for management. This is just an opportunity to have another tool available in making selections and making decisions for management positions and these identified positions. Again, it would be on a case-by-case. Each exemption would come forward for discussion. Any objections could be discussed at that point, and the council would have full review.
And what's the downside? Why would people,
I think that
why
would
would
be either
people object?
beholder.
What have past objections been based on?
I'm not aware of what exactly was articulated before, if anybody had concerns about what objections would be. Generally, there could be concerns that when you appoint people outside of the civil service system, there's obviously not the competitive exam process that civil service employees go through, and non-civil service employees do not enjoy the same property rights legally as civil service employees. But having said that, there are some tremendous advantages to being able to hire either on a community-based hiring basis, like we do at the Recreation and Parks facilities, that allows people from the neighborhoods to work at a nearby park, as opposed to being on a list and traveling 50 miles to where there's an opening. So there's pros and cons of being able to, and in this case, it's the professional expertise category.
That's where it would
So
fall under, yes.
obviously that allows for critical, unique positions to be filled and looking for the best qualified candidate. And sometimes when positions are so unique, it doesn't lend itself to the competitive exam process, the same as a classification with a larger number of employees that would be in those positions.
So how are we doing now in terms of the cap on these positions?
Currently, there's 142 that fall under the 150 provision.
Is this coming forward to us because this is a great hardship? It seems like we're still under the cap.
We're responding to the instructions from the budget.
I mean, that's fluctuated over the years.
It has.
Sometimes it's right at the cap, sometimes it's not. So it's cyclical.
And with that number, she's correct. It just goes back and forth as people leave.
Mr. O'Farrell, do you have questions, comments?
It's all here in the report, and it was a budget request from the mayor's office originally, and I don't think I have enough personal background on this issue to understand that further. I mean, what is the genesis of this? Is it just so that we have greater flexibility?
That's exactly what it would provide, is just a greater flexibility to make selections. And there are competitive processes that go about with these selections. It just provides the opportunity to possibly reach outside of a regular candidate pool.
Across all the departments, across the whole spectrum.
Yes. Also, current city employees could also compete for these positions if they meet the qualifications. It's just simply provides opportunity for management to consider candidates outside the regular group.
Yes, and Matthias Farfan for Office of the CLA, and it's really the mayor's office that included this in his proposed budget,
Right.
so he'd be the one to be able to answer why there is a need to increase the limit. Yes.
Maybe we could get clarification on exactly why before we move forward, or something.
Yes, and I agree with the chair. There are a list of pros and cons to increasing the limit. I could see where in certain series of classes, as your career progresses, you do promote, and as you promote, there's a smaller and smaller number of those higher level positions. So I could see where there could be a fear that some of those higher level ones, this now would up the number to be able to start appointing people to those next echelon of management positions, as opposed to continuing with the civil service route.
I wonder if we could have this item come back at our next meeting with a more specific justification of the need, and also an outreach to the main city unions to get some feedback on the issue as well. And I would think if we did this, we probably wouldn't go to 100. I think we'd probably be a little more judicious in the number too. But if we'd come back with some more specificity in terms of why the need to increase the cap, since we do seem to have a little cap space as it is, I think 100 would probably be pretty unnecessary.
So basically, we'll be consulting with the mayor's office as to where this originated from?
And on what basis do they need it, and do they really need 100? And let them know the committee's inclined to slash that number to something, if we do it, to something more modest. And also if we could get some feedback from some of our union partners so we know what we're up against if we're going to have a contentious impact bargaining, or if folks are not too dead set against it.
We can certainly do that. I believe, though, that originally the report back was more investigative, not necessarily moving forward, but we will certainly consult with the mayor's office to clarify that. What was the original intent? Was it implementation or more research as to how, if at all considered, how would we go about that? But we'll clarify that.
Very good. Without objection, that'll be the direction. And item number 5.
Item 5, CAO report relative to substitute and in lieu position authorities needed in 2014-15.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Lopez with the Office of the CAO. As part of Council File 14-0600, the CAO was instructed to prepare and present a listing of all substitute authorities and in lieu positions for 2014-15. As provided in Section 2 of each department's DPO, which is the Departmental Personnel Ordinance, the CAO is authorized to fill substitute positions to assist departments and bureaus in meeting specific operating needs. Often these are of temporary and short-term nature. Some of the purposes include replacing an employee on a sick leave or short workers' comp leave to meet peak or seasonal workload, to reduce backlogs, or to provide temporary authority to provide overlap of positions for training purposes. Similarly, Section 3 of the DPO provides the CAO the authority to approve the filling of positions in lieu of other vacant positions, where vacancies must have a salary range equal or higher than the salary of the class position that is requested. As part of the budget resolution, the City Council did adopt a policy that any substitute position requests where a department did not have sufficient savings to fund the position would require council approval. These type of requests will be submitted directly to the council for your consideration. Now, the list before you is the requested list by department that have been approved by the CAO under their authority into the DPO. So this is specifically informational for the council. And as such, we recommend that you note and file this report. Do you have any questions?
So one of the reasons for a substitute authority is to deal with peak workload. How's that work?
When it's seasonal, let's say, for example, for finance, they do have seasonal workload for business tax season, so they need additional bodies to process more licenses, business tax licenses and such. Similar for building and safety and general services, things of that sort.
And when these positions are granted, is there a permanent position that's kept vacant at the same time, usually, or no?
Some departments do hold positions vacant, but under this new policy, the CAO has reviewed the budgets of each department to ensure that they have the adequate funding available to fund the positions. But many of the positions on the list, they do hold positions vacant to fund them.
So when they don't hold them vacant, who pays for the authority?
They usually have salary savings, or they have existing vacancies. Sometimes they have attrition or retirements, and they don't backfill. And a lot of that stuff is held in managed hiring once the positions are vacated. So they use some of their salary savings to fund them.
Very good. Other questions or comments?
No, sir.
Then we will note and file that report without objection. And I think we have item 7 left. No, that item 8.
Item number 8, CAO report relative to proposed contract with First Class Vending Inc. for vending machine services and maintenance at environmental services facilities.
Good afternoon, Janice Cheng Yu, Office of the CAO. Before you is a contract request and recommendation for animal services to contract with First Class Vending for a period of 5 years with one 5-year contract extension option to install vending machines, snack and beverage machines at animal shelter facilities. This is a piggyback off of existing Rec and Parks contract with First Class Vending. And it's no cost to the city, and a portion of the gross revenues will come to the city and will be deposited into the Animal Welfare Trust Fund for shelter improvements and one-time purchases. There are a few items that our report does recommend to include into the draft contract. That includes that the original request was to be a term of 5 years with one 5-year extension option and an additional 3-year extension option. We just wanted to ensure that the contract falls within the period of the original Rec and Parks contract, so we recommended that that term just be shortened to a one 5-year extension option. The other one is that the 1.5% of gross receipts is included as part of the revenue paid to the city to cover the cost of utilities. That is included in the Rec and Parks contract, and it was meant to be included in the draft contract, but is not there at this time, and so we just wanted to make sure that is also included. And authorizes the controller to establish an account to receive the funds into the Animal Welfare Trust Fund, and specifically identify that these are from the receipts of vending machine sales and are to be used for one-time purchases.
Those would all be added as technical amendments, correct?
These are all included in the CA report at this time.
Included.
Yes.
Okay. Are these vending machines available to the public and employees and volunteers?
The vending machines would be installed in public areas, accessible to the public and to staff.
And do we have any idea how much money is likely to be collected, what the city...
The department can provide a little bit more information. I think typically a study is done to see how much traffic would be generated. At this time, a study was not done by the vendor, and so a tentative agreement was reached to say that 34% of gross receipts, or a minimum of $9,838 annually, would come into the city as part of the gross receipts. The vendor does have an option at this point, because there was an extensive study was not done, to do kind of a pilot where they would roll out the vending machines to 2 locations and have a minimum of 12 months to install them and see if it's a profitable enterprise. And after 12 months, if it's not, then they can choose to discontinue it with no other repercussions, or can continue it further if they so choose to.
Very good. Any questions, comments?
Quick question, does this also follow the guidelines of the good food policy?
Yes, included as part of the contract. It says it must follow all city guidelines for vending.
Terrific. Very good.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions or comments, we will approve the CAO's recommendation without objection. And lastly, we have one general public comment. Phyllis Doherty.
Phyllis Doherty, I wanted to thank you very much for passing the ACE program. You know how important this is to us, but I want to make a couple of comments, and I couldn't be here the other day, and maybe this is more appropriate here anyway. We have management of a law enforcement agency where no one has law enforcement experience at the upper level. Mr. Chavez, they're very nice people, Ms. Barnett, and Mr. Salazar. He was very, very briefly a law enforcement, an animal control officer for maybe a year and a half, about 10 years ago or 12 years ago. He really has no management experience in animal control or in law enforcement of that nature. So what I'm concerned about is I'm hearing, and I've heard Ms. Barnett say that maybe the canvassers can issue tickets or citations on all of the list of violations, and I think you need to keep a very, very close watch on that. While it might be possible to word a pre-prepared, pre-written citation regarding licensing so that canvassers could obtain the proper training and the proper authorization to write it. When it comes to the other issues, there's still misdemeanors that could even become felonies. And any attempt to write any kind of a citation for the city's liability alone, let alone the fact that we want to be able to follow up for the benefit of the animal. You can understand that the wording, the elements of the crime, the proper use of the correct section, and so forth, you have to have a sworn officer. So please be sure these are all misdemeanors. They're not infractions, even though they're starting out as being administrative citations. They can graduate into real crimes. And another thing, they don't have the experience to view what's really going on with the animal. They may see a loose animal, but they don't have the experience to look at the body, the condition of the animal, and gauge, is it to the point where there's really some neglect on this animal, or might it actually be abuse and so forth. That all needs to be done by officers, and you have no one in management in the upper levels that can teach them or help them with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, with no other business before us, we are adjourned.